Okay, as I start on this drawing, again, I'm going to be using this as reference, and I'm going to be using it reference to give myself a 4 projection view, top, front, right, and isometric. So I went ahead and printed out a sheet that I have on my website. It's a blank drawing sheet, and I'm going to go ahead and take that down right now. Remember, the key on drawing and drafting and stuff, especially with masking tape, is not to use a lot. You know, less is more, as I like to say. And I went ahead and put these registration marks down so I'll know where I need to be each time. Now I try to get to the upper top corner, as you can see right here on this one, and then I'll work my way around the drawing, typically counterclockwise. You can go clockwise if you want, whatever makes it, you know, comfortable to you. Again, less is more. Don't use a lot of masking tape. Try to get to the very corner of what it is you're doing. Make sure that it's burnished down really good, the paper is. Now, the drawing that you're looking at right here, this drawing sheet that I have, it's actually on my website. It's on richardplatt.net. It's in the tutorial section. It's on the first page down on the lower right-hand side. You should be able to find it. Okay, now, if you notice here, it's already got the 3 registration marks here for my 4 quadrants that I designed. Key to this whole thing is to draw lightly as you start your design. So I'm going to come down to the lower one right here, put my pencil, as you see right here, my ruler. Again, I made this ruler, and for this drawing right here, I'm going to go ahead and again use my handmade folded 30-60-90 triangle. I got some feedback from some of you saying you couldn't draw it because you didn't have a 30-60-90. That's not true. You can draw this directly from my website, or you can print it from my website and do as I've done on both, either the hand-drawn or the printed one, and fold it over, tape it down, and then I've got a functional 30-60-90 triangle that will let me successfully draw my isometric drawing, as you can see here. Okay, so let's continue. I'm going to go ahead and draw my 4 quadrant views in, lightly drawing them so I can erase them easily later. Let's come across here. I'm going to come over here to my upper quadrant. One thing that's important about a drawing is to make sure that your drawing is well laid out. As you can see here, I'm coming in and I'm drawing the 4 quadrant views of my orthographic and isometric projection. So I've got these individual corners now right here. These will be the corner starting points of my part. Okay, again, top, front, right, isometric. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and looking at this part. Essentially, it's a rectangular part if you look at it. It's 2 rectangles. It's a top view here, a right view here. Again, right is going this direction, top is going down in that direction, and front is going up on this direction. Of course, the isometric, you can see that. So again, top, front, right. I'll lay that aside. Okay, it says the part is 4 inches. If I draw a 4-inch part here, as you can see on my ruler, it's going to go off the page. So I'm going to draw it at half scale. So I'll come down over here in the bottom, and I'm going to determine that my drawing is drawn in half scale. I'm going to go ahead and put it in here right now so I won't forget. 1 inch, colon, equals half scale. Okay. So let's start with the first piece. It says it's 4 inches across. Well, I'm going to come across at 2 inches, as you see here. I'm going to make a mark. Come up here, 2 inches, as you can see here, and I'm going to make a mark. And then it says that the drawing is 1.5 inches across. So if I'm drawing at half scale, so I divide 1.5 divided by 2, it's 0.75. So that would be 3/4 of an inch. So I'll come over here and I'll find this here, and I'll make a mark at 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so now with these marks already laid in here, I'm going to draw myself some light lines. Again, light lines. You don't want to commit to your heavier object lines until your drawing is more complete. So as you can see here, I'm drawing my light lines here and here. I'll come back over here as well, and I'll draw my light line, as you can see here. Okay, now looking at our reference again, it says it's 1.5 inches. It says it's 2.5 inches tall. Well, I divide that by 2, as you see over here. That would make that 1.25. So I'll come over here and I'll find 1.25. I'm going to kind of move around here. Hope I don't hit the camera. There's 1.25. I'll come across here on my extension lines, so these light lines that I've drawn, and I'll make 1.25. Looks pretty good. So I'll just draw myself again, light areas and lines that define my object. Okay, let's take a look at this here a little bit. Something about this is bothering me. I'm going to use my 30, 60, 90 triangle. Move it over here, make sure it's vertical. Yep, I thought I saw a line off a little bit. So I'll come back in and redefine it. That's why you always draw lightly in case you make a mistake like that right there. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's go back to referencing our drawing. Now, it says that it's 1.5 inches this way. So again, for the top view, as it's designated in the front view, it should be 1.5 inches as it's saying. So divide that by 2, it's going to be 0.75 or 3/4 of an inch. So we'll come over here. I'll move around so I can get to this a little bit better, and I'll find my 3/4 of an inch mark here. Now, sometimes on your ruler, it's easier if you just go down to where it's not as defined, like in these 30 seconds as you see here, but go actually to the 16th. So I'm going to go find this mark here, which shows it's at 3/4 of an inch. Make my mark there. I'll come across to this side here again, finding my 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so I'll make my mark there, and then I'll draft my part across the top here. Now, I always get my top, my front, my right done first, because later I'll come back and do the ISO at the end. Now, let's look at this thing. We have one face that's already done. We only have one side that's already done, and that's this guy right here, the front view. Because if you look, all you're seeing is just one blank rectangular shape. You don't see everything behind that unless you come in and you delineate with the dotted line, which we will do that. So we know that's in. We're going to come in here and we're going to draw our object lines, which is the outer edge of the drawing. The outer edge of the part is called the object line. Okay, so I'll draw that heavier, darker. Okay, as you can see here, I'm drawing that in. Switch that around. I'll draw that in there as well. Okay, now let's go back and look at this for a second. Okay, this says 1 1/4 inches. So half of 1 1/4 would be 5/8 or 0.625. So let's go ahead and put that in. So we're going to come up here to what's known as 5/8. We're going to put our ruler down where we need to be, and we're going to find that mark that says 5/8. I'm going to make a little mark there. I'm going to come across over here, same thing, make another little mark here. I'll put that in, and then I'll draw a dashed line coming across. Now this is the hidden line that you don't see, that is this part of the part right here, this gap right here. That's the hidden line. So I'm going to put in a lightly defined hidden line. So there it is. So that's drawn. Now, this continues on across to the other side, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be correctly oriented. So I'm just going to put myself a mark right here. I'm going to come across over here, and I'm going to lightly draw that line in. Okay, that's good. Now, if we look up here, this says 1 inch. That's this gap that we got to put in right there. So 1 inch, half of 1 inch is 0.5 or half an inch. So I'll flip this over. I'll come in and make my mark here. Make my mark on this side over here at half an inch. I'll come down here, make myself half an inch. Make myself half an inch. Okay, so now I'm going to come in here and line up these two lines. The old saying goes, connect the dots. I'll draw this guy in, this line. Again, I try to draw lightly the first time. Okay. Let's see how this looks. I'm not quite sure on that. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Okay, so we got that drawn in like you see here. Now, I'm going to come back in, since I've got this part pretty well defined on this view. I'm going to draw in my heavier lines, as you can see right here. Okay. All right. got a little bit off on this one up here. I think I did, so I'm gonna make that up there a little bit there. Again, always draw lightly on your part before you go too heavily dark, okay? It's better to get it sketched in lightly first, and then we come back and we draw it heavy and darker as we finish the view. Okay, so we're drawing it up here like this. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to put my line up here for the top. I should have done this over here on this one. I'll do that right now. Put that line up here on the top. So I got that drawn in. And I'll go ahead and draw this object line in a little heavier. Now that I've got it pretty well close to defined. Okay, again, up here at the top. All right, so parts kind of being drawn. So we got our top, our front, and our right view. Get that little mark off there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tool called so I can find it here. I had it laid out here a few moments ago. I'm going to take a tool and I'm going to come back in and I'm going to make some erasure marks here to kind of get my work area cleaned up a little bit. I think I must have misplaced it. Yeah, I did. All right, we'll just use this. I'm going to use this template here to kind of erase some of this area here. Again, I draw very lightly, not to make it hard to erase later. Kind of cleaning up this drawing a little bit here. Again, you're going to be judged and evaluated based on your craftsmanship, your ability to design, and your ability to draw properly. It's people who take a lot of pride in their drawing. Companies pick up on that really quickly, just like they'd pick up on how well you dress, how well you groom yourself, all that. It becomes an important factor in how you are evaluated as an employee. So anyway, I'm coming across here. Again, drawing these little lines heavier. I may go over them a couple times to get it before I actually like it. But then again, if I go over it a couple times, then it better be right, because otherwise it's next to impossible to erase that line out of there. Okay, let's get this a little heavier. Change out my lead. Oops, I got some in there. Technically it's not lead, it's graphite, but we'll call it that for now. Okay, so there's my there's my three projections, my top, my front, and my right. Now I'm going to come over here now and start with the isometric. Again, the isometric drawing is a three-dimensional view of what you're actually drafting. So I get my folded triangle out here again, and I'm going to draw some very light lines to sketch this part in first. Okay, so now we'll come down here like that. Notice how light it is. Now, based on our drawing that we're working from on part 20, this edge right here is 4 inches, but if I take and divide that by 2, let's make sure it's 4 inches. Yep, it's 4 inches. Divided by 2, it's going to be 2 inches. I don't think that's changed on us. So I'll take my ruler here, and you can call them rulers, or you can call them scales. Scales are something that look more akin to an object like this. It's a three-sided thing to call them scales. I have various types of scales. That was a metric scale I just showed you. Here's a broken architectural scale. We use it quite a bit. But in our case, we're going to use our custom ruler that we made, our custom scale. So I'm going to go ahead and mark these points here. I know where my 2 is, which is this point here. I'll take my 30, 60, 90, and I'll draw a vertical line. I'll flip this over. So it can be drawn. You don't necessarily have to have a fine drafting tool, but you can draw it with a paper tool like this. Now I'll flip my 30, 60, 90 over here, and I'm going to again draw very lightly the opposite line so that it defines it as a three-dimensional part. Now we know that this part is 2.5 inches tall, so it'd be 2.5 this way. So if we divide that by 2, it's going to be 1 1/4, as we had determined earlier. So I'm going to come over here and find 1 1/4. It looks like 1 1/4 to me. Make a mark. I'll come down here as well. I didn't mean to hit the camera there. Come down here as well, and I'll make a mark up there as well. Okay, so these two marks are my, pardon the expression, connecting the dots. So I'll move this up here to about these two registration marks I got. I'll flip this guy over, as you see, and I'll get it in here as close as I can. There we go. Again, lightly draw that line in. Okay, I'll flip him over, and I'm going to come off this way, lightly drawing him in. Come back up here to the top, lightly drawing him in. Now, what's kind of magical about designing in 3D, and especially with isometrics, is things start to appear once you get some basic dimensions in. So I'm going to go ahead and make my mark here. I'll come up here to 3/4 of an inch. Remember, 3/4 of an inch is half of 1 1/2. Okay, so I'll make myself a mark here. I'll come over here, 3/4 of an inch. I think that's correct. Make myself a mark there. Now all I'm going to do, instead of using my 30, 60, 90, I'm just going to connect the dots. Lightly draw it. Do not commit to a heavy object line until you have it correctly drawn first. Okay, so there's my little triangular box. It looks pretty good. Now, I still need to come back in and do this cutout right here, this body part right there, so we'll do that right now. Now, we know it's a 1/2 inch over, so I'm going to come over here to my scale, and I'm going to lean in here so I can find 1/2 inch. There it is. Looks like that's it. And I'll come back here on this side here and get it lined up. Hopefully I'm not trying to bang my camera. Draw me a 1/2 inch there. Now in this case here, because it's kind of hard to get to, I'm going to just go ahead and use my 30, 60, 90. Okay. Oops, I've got to flip it over this way. Okay, so I got my 30, 60, 90. Draw that diagonal very lightly. Come back, draw that lightly right there, as you see. Now it looks pretty good. Now you can see the cutout starting to form. Now I'm just going to take, because I've got these vertices here, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go ahead and draw this down a little past halfway. Come over here, do the same thing, draw this down a little halfway. And get this one in the back right here, draw that down a little more than halfway. Now you can kind of see the part starting to appear. Now we know it's 1 1/4 on the height, so we divide that, it's going to be 5/8. So I'm going to lean around here. I'm going to have to stand up to kind of get to this. Sometimes you got to do that. And I'm going to find my 5/8 right here. So here's 1/2 inch, and so 5/8 would be right there. Come down here on this side and do the same thing, just so I'm lined up perfectly. Yeah, I got that spot right there, correct. Come over here, 5/8 again. That's that mark right there. Okay. Now we're going to draft, lightly draw, as I meant to say, these lines in. Just lightly draw them in. Now to get to this one, I'll come across this way. There we go. That's it. So I'm going to go ahead and register this up again with my ruler on these registration marks. I'm going to take my 30, 60, 90 and draw this last draft line in here. Again, lightly draw them. Okay. Okay, so now there's our three-dimensional representation of our part. That's good. That's the isometric that we're looking for. Now, these are all lightly drawn, so I can come back and erase. See what I'm saying right here? I can erase that. This tall vertical line, I can get him out of there. I can get this out of there. Okay. One last thing I forgot to tell you. One other thing I forgot to tell you is that if you don't have the ability to print, you're going to have to draw this border sheet out. It's not hard. It's just 1/4 inch off each edge. 1/4 inch here, and then another 1/2 inch. That means that's 3/4 inch from the base of the paper up here to the top. Again, it's 11-inch piece of paper going across this way. It's 5.5 inches is halfway. Then we go an inch to the other side. That's why this is at 5.5, this is at 4.5, and this is at 6.5. Over here, you know, half of 8.5 is 4 1/4, so that's 3 1/4, and then that's 5 1/4. 4 1/4, that's 5 1/4 right there. So 3 1/4, 4 1/4, 5 1/4. and you do that for all 4 sides, you get your registration marks. Okay, now that this is drawn, I'm going to go ahead and draw it in heavy, darker. So I'm going to come in here and I'll just get right on that. Again, sometimes I'll go over it twice, depending on your drawing. But remember, when you go over it twice, you got to make sure it's done right. Otherwise, it's next to impossible to erase those lines. Okay, that looks pretty good. Come over here to this side here, draft that in, draft that in. We'll come down this vertical side. And usually I work myself from one side to the other drawing, so start on this side over here. I can barely see it. Let me see if I can get over here like this. Yeah, I can see it better. Okay, so that's in. Now, I'll flip this down around here. Put that in. Put that in. I'll put this in here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Come over here and draw this diagonal line in a little bit. Okay, looks good. This back diagonal line. Put that in. Oops, pen broke, pencil broke. Okay, come back in and put this vertical in. Get these heavier in the top. Okay, flip that around. Walking on down this way. Okay. Okay, that's in. Put this one in here. Okay. I'll draft this in like so. One of my students came back from a job interview last year, and he said, Mr. Platt, he said, it was actually 2 years ago, he came back and said, Mr. Platt, they were so impressed with my manual drafting. And it was so funny, before he went in and had this job interview, he came to me and he said, I think I better go back in my portfolio and clean up some of my original drawings I did as a freshman. And again, he's a senior. In fact, he called me this last weekend to tell me about another job he's going to go apply to that pays him a whole lot more money. I think he's got a good shot at getting it. Okay, so he went back and he cleaned up his drawings, did a tremendous job on them, made them look a whole lot better than he did when he was a freshman. And they immediately, going through his portfolio, flipped to that back part of his portfolio and saw his manual drafting. And they were extremely impressed with him, and they said, wow, this is like a lost art. And technically, or I guess in somewhat ways, drafting manually, some people would like to tell you it's a lost art, but it really isn't. It's something that's a skill that we still need and value highly in this country as well as in any other country in the world. And we make our drawings good enough so that people from any part of the country or any part of the world can see what we've done and interpret our drawings and able to make that part. Okay, so this looks pretty good right now. This is our top, our front, and our right view. And as you can see, the hidden line on this front view right here that designates this mark right there. You can see me clean up that little mark right there. Now I'm going to find my eraser shield and show you what that looks like. And you can get things like that off Amazon or at Office Depot or Staples and some of those different office stores that have drafting components. And anyway, we'll come back to this in a moment.